Hello and welcome to part 3 of my solar powered weather station project. Firstly, I must apologise for taking so long to get to this stage. Unfortunately, I've got a full-time job and at least try to have a life, so all of this sort of stuff just has to get fitted in when and where I can. Unfortunately, that means that it all takes much longer than I first anticipated, so thank you for sticking around. Anyway, on with the video this time. In this episode, I'm going to cover things like soldering the temperature probe onto the circuit board, the Weatherproof project box, and how and where I'm going to install items in it, and finally, installing the Weatherproof gland, which will mean making it less weatherproof, and drilling a hole inside of the box. So without further ado, let's get on with it, and I'll see you again at the end. Okay, so we find ourselves back at the workbench, and as I said in the introduction, this is the time when we start pulling things together. So we're going to start with a bit of soldering. In part 2, you will remember that I coupled up a test rig to try out the temperature sensor. Well, now we have to make this slightly more permanent, and that means pulling all of that rig apart and putting it on a piece of circuit board. And this takes me to my small stuff up when I ordered the circuit board. As I told you when I started this project, I've not done any electronics since I was at college, and back then everything I did was on VeroBoard. And that's a great prototyping stripboarding tool where you can solder each individual component on and then break the tracks when you don't want the current to flow down that particular route. Now, I didn't pay that much attention when I was ordering, so what I actually bought was these little boards which have individual paths running on both sides, but there are no tracks. So although they are the perfect size for going into the project box, I'll have to make my own tracks to solder on the back of the board. But never mind, you have to expect these things when you're dealing with extreme incompetence. Now, let's quickly go through the process of getting the temperature probe test rig dismantled first, and then we have to rebuild it on the circuit board. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you at this point will notice that I've completely replaced the Blu-Tack based Helping Hands system, which is patented, with something a little bit more sturdy. So I've gone to the conventional sort of crocodile clip thing with bendy arms. So you can all stop laughing at me now and all stop posting funny comments in the comment section. Once dismantled, this is the case of resoldering on the circuit board, soldering in the tracks, and voila, this little part is done. So I'll end this little section with some speeded up footage of me completing this task. Cool. Now that's the soldering complete. Let's think about mounting everything in the project box. Now, if you've watched the little extras video I made entitled, Is My Project Box Waterproof? The link is up in the corner if you want to watch it now, by the way. Anyway, you'll know the answer to that question. So without further ado, I give you my new project box, now with a transparent lid. And this isn't some cheap Chinese rubbish as the last one was. It's made by a company called Fibox or Fibox. Can't quite remember how you pronounce it, but it's Finnish made, and it definitely has some air of quality about it. And it also passes my let's stick this in the shower and see if it leaks test. So that's good enough for me. Now, one of the main differences between this box and the old box, other than the old one was as watertight as a sieve, is that the gasket is around the top of the actual box itself, rather than the gasket being around the lid, which was in the old system, the old box, which was, I always thought was a bit strange. This one's much more logical. Anyway, it's really good at keeping out water, and it will be really good at keeping out water right up to the point that I drill a big hole in the side for the sensors and the solar panel cables to pass through. But that will come later. Right, now, so we've done the soldering and we've purchased the box, and the next decision has to be made, which is where to put everything inside and how to fasten it all down. And I admit, at the point when I was looking at that box, I hadn't given this much thought at all. So I thought I'd start with the power bank because it's the biggest thing in the box and it's the heaviest thing. And quite frankly, it only really goes on one of the sides, as the other stuff is going to go and be attached to the base of the box. So I ummed and ahed and ummed and ahed and ummed some more, and finally I decided on putting it down the long side of the box. And of course, then came the question of how I fasten it to the box. There's no chance of me drilling holes into the case of the power bank because of the battery, obviously. And there was only one really way that you could do it, and that was using Velcro pads. Well, obviously, I'm not real Velcro, cheap knockoff hook and eye pads, actually, but they do work. Well, they partially work. So the hook and eye interaction is actually so strong that if you try to uncouple the device, in this case, if you try to take the power bank off the side of the box, then it actually rips the glue part of the pad off and leaves the hook and eye part still attached. But ultimately, the battery sticks to the box, and that's all I care about at the moment. So with a bit of manoeuvring and replacing of pads into the right position, the power bank is stuck to the side of the box and the first part is installed. So joy of joys. Now, where to put the Raspberry Pi? Again, the same lack of planning is obvious here. So I needed to bear in mind now where the power bank was now located. So I could use a small USB cable to come from the power bank into the Raspberry Pi without trying to accommodate huge masses of cable that I have to somehow ram into the box. I also needed to remember that the Raspberry Pi, if it goes bang, and it's fair bet that this might happen because at some point, because it's me playing around with electronics, me doing all the work and me playing around with electronics and water. And that's never a great combination. So it's one point I may have to couple the Raspberry Pi back up to a monitor, so I need to make sure that the HDMI socket is somehow available. So other than that, locating the Raspberry Pi was always going to be fairly easy actually, and as it was in a case already, attaching it to the box was another perfect case for using the Velcro pads again. Hey. Okay, so now we're coming to the most difficult part of putting things in a box. Finding the best location for the sensor board. The power bank is already in and fixed to the side of the box. The Raspberry Pi was in a great location and attached to the base of the box. But with the circuit board, I wanted to use the locating points built into the base of the project box. They're molded in. You can see here that there are actually screw holes and mounting locations all over the bottom. But I also needed to consider where I was going to fit or feed the sensor cables out of the box and into the external fresh air, so you can actually monitor the temperature. Now, I'm not going to lie to you people, this section here, I spent way too much time on it. In fact, I did more umming and ahhing than I'd ever done before, and ultimately I found that the screws and the spacers that I was going to use to fasten the sensor circuit board to the base of the box, they weren't really going to fit, as the screw holes were all in the wrong places, and also the mounting hardware for the box, the Fibox or the Fibox mounting hardware, is all proprietary, and I didn't have any of that. So that was a bit of a bummer. So the question was posed again, how was I going to fix the board to the box? And okay, there was no jeopardy here. Velcro pads came to the rescue once more. So it's all looking rather positive. Everything is mounted in its lovely box, and it should all work when I turn it on. But you'll have to wait for that. How else would I get you to come back for part 4? But wait on. How are the solar panels going to charge the power bank, you're asking me? You're sitting there and asking me. I know, I can hear this. And how can the sensor measure the outside ambient temperature? They're all firmly attached in the box with no external ingress point, or egress point for that matter. Well, yes, you've guessed it. We've come to the scary part. I need to make a fairly expensive waterproof project box no longer waterproof by cutting a big hole in the side. But, you know, needs must, so let's just get this over and done with. So first we need to place a hole centrally in the wall and the side of the box. And it's definitely a case of measure twice, cut once. So I put a lot of masking tape up so I can measure and with a Sharpie identify where the center is. Then it's up to me to drill a central location hole. And that is so we can use this big boy, the cone cutter. So we know the diameter of the waterproof gland we're going to pass the cables through, and it's just a case of keep drilling using the cone cutter a little at a time to get the right size. Then once that's all finally complete, we can take off the masking tape. We can clean up the hole and insert the gland and the cable for the sensor, tightening as we go. Now we will be unscrewing this again, obviously, when we plumb in the solar panels. Finally, we just have to screw on the lid and it's done. So there we are. It's all in its own self-contained box. So I guess we must be nearly finished, right? Well, we're not quite there yet, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So for the next video, episode 4, I'll be doing the last few bits on the solar panels, including working out where to put them in the garden to get the best light, and also doing some more work on the software, including sending all of the data up to AWS using their IoT API. So that's it for now. If you enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe, and press the bell so you'll know when the next episode hits the internet. Until then, thanks for watching.